Merry Christmas, everyone. Today we are continuing on with the end of year party where I talk about my favorites and least favorite books of the year, and today's video is all about all the books I DNF'd, which I'm incredibly excited to talk about, to be honest, because I was never a reader that DNF'd prior to 2020. I grew up with the belief that if you start a book you have to finish it. So the idea of DNFing, for those of you who don't know what DNF means, it means did not finish. I started it and then I put it down. Yeah, I grew up believing this was not okay. Then I found out it is okay, and I took advantage of DNFing. I DNF'd a total of 14 books this year, which is quite the amount, and with not having a lot of time to get through this video, we're going to try and get through it as quickly as we can. I first of all want to apologize for the fact that I've had a number of part 1 and part 2 videos. That's because I'm trying to make them shorter for you guys. With this one, I only want one part, so I'm going to try and get through it as quickly as I can. The first book that I DNF'd this year, I'll put it up there, was Succubus Blues by Rochelle Mead. I thought, Succubus, yes, I'm very much intrigued. I've always been intrigued with the mythology that surrounds succubi, and so to have it in a book just sounded so amazing. It sounded too good to be true, and it was. We are following a succubus whose name is Georgina, who just so happens to have a human job. What also annoyed me is that I think I got about halfway through, if not 3/4 of the way through this one, and the majority of the book was her human life rather than exploring her succubus life, and that just really annoyed me. I went into the book for the succubus parts and they just were very few and far between, so I DNF'd this book. This is what started my revenge, my comeback to I'm not enjoying you, I'm gonna put you down. Succubus Blues started it all. The next book that I DNF'd was this book, Three Dark Crowns by Kendara Blake. Oh my goodness, I had forgotten about this book until I started preparing for this video, and this book had such an amazing premise. The basic loose premise of this book is that it's revolving around 3 queens who are sisters, and they can't all rule at once. Each of them have magical abilities, and only one can rule, so they all have to battle each other, and only the one that wins will remain and rule the kingdom. This sounded incredible. I love royal themed books, I love fantasies, so this sounded really good. I did not get far into this book at all, and that is because of the flowery writing style. So I'm going to save myself and you guys a ton of time here by defining what a flowery writing style is, because it does come up with the reason why I DNF'd a number of other books as well. So flowery writing is any sort of writing that goes beyond basic writing. So it can be a ton of metaphors, it can be like a ton of descriptions. The writing is written in a way that is very much, you know, you can tell the book is appreciated because it's written in an advanced way, and that's wonderful for people who love to read books for the sake of its writing style. But I'm not like that. The more simplistic you can write, the better it's going to be for me, and the reason for that is because it distracts me. I don't want to read books that are so extremely descriptive or metaphorical, aka flowery, because I then need to translate what the author is trying to say before I can continue on with the rest of the plot. How, when it was over, that they looked so peaceful, had it not been for the froth on their lips, you would have thought they died in their sleep. It's just so unnecessary. Next we have The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. long story short, there was a night in summer, and I'm now back in summer, so that's interesting. I believe it was in January or February, one of the 2 months. So in Australia, we have summer, December, January, February. I was in bed, I could not sleep, so I decided to listen to an audio book because I didn't want to get up. I came across Kiss of Deception and I did love it. I think I made it about halfway through before I actually DNF'd the audio book. Now, about a quarter of the way through the book, I was loving it so much that I decided to put it on hold at my local library. The day I DNF'd the audiobook, the day my hold came through in the library for the physical book, so I just took that upon myself as this is the angel's way of telling me I need to keep reading this book. It just became more and more boring the more I read this book, so I ended up putting it down. The next book that I DNF'd was this book, The Magician's Guild by Trudy Canavan. Now, this book, I actually need to go back to my summer DNF video to remember why I DNF'd it, because I remember nothing about this book except for one scene where people are throwing rocks at these like cops or something. But apparently the reason why I say apparently because I don't remember it at all, was because there are beings that have magical abilities, but they're the evil guys, and there didn't seem to be anyone who was a good being that had a magical ability, and that just was all types of wrong for me, as I said in the video. It just didn't work for me because, you know, I want to see magic being played out for both sides. I want to see good and evil, and not just evil beings being magical. I just wasn't even enjoying the plot as a whole. It just wasn't appealing to me, and so I DNF'd it. The next book that I DNF'd was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I DNF'd this book not once but twice, okay? So I really wanted to get back into classics, and so I decided to start with this one, and it just wasn't doing it for me. I found myself getting really bored with this book, so I ended up DNFing it, I think about a quarter of the way through, and then I was talking to some of my friends at work about this particular book and saying how, yeah, it just wasn't for me, and they were all saying, oh, but you have to read this book, it's amazing, it's a classic for a reason, you will love it, you just gotta push through. And I said, okay, fine, I will. So I re-picked it back up and read to the halfway mark, and it bored me so much, no lie, I fell asleep and the book dropped to the floor while I was reading it. I ended up watching the film adaptation of this because I wanted to make sure that I DNF'd it for the right reason, and even after watching the film, I was still extremely content that I DNF'd it. The next book that I DNF'd was this book, The Eye of the World, which is the first book in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. Okay, so I gave this book a go because it was extremely popular on BookTube, and there were so many books that came out, and then Robert Jordan ended up passing away, bless his soul, and Brandon Sanderson, my favourite author, was going to take over the series, and I thought, yay, I want to read this too so I can get involved in discussions with you guys, but no! No. The writing style was all types of wrong for me. And I was actually hanging up washing while I was listening to the prologue, and I'm thinking, this doesn't make any sense. What the heck is going on? And it was just driving me nuts. So I ended up DNFing this book. And now we get on to the books that I did keep on me, because I knew one day I would do a video like this. Once this video is done, most of these books are going to go. But the next book that I DNF'd was this book, East by Edith Patel. Now I have to say that I am strongly considering rereading this book in 2021, because the reason why I DNF'd this book was because there were too many different perspectives in the book. However, I have now read Stormlight Archives, and these have a ton of different perspectives. I've also read this book, The Guest List, which has a ton of different perspectives. I have multi-perspected myself out this year, and I just wasn't in the same place then reading this as I am now. And I do definitely feel that I would be able to cope with it now. I just couldn't then. Not so with the next book I DNF'd, because the next book I DNF'd was this book, The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. This book will be unhauled either at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, when all the other books go as well, because this book just did not vibe with me. Now, by the time I got to this book, we were into the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown situation. And because of this, I could not borrow books from my library anymore. So I started ordering books from my local Dimmicks store. So these guys were absolutely amazing. That's why I'm putting the picture of it up there, because I want them to get some recognition. Now, Dimmicks would, with my orders, because I would order like 5, 6, 7, whatever books a month, because the majority of time I was reading while we're in lockdown. So I would bulk order with these guys. They would, out of appreciation, throw in some free books, and this was one of them. And I was so appreciative to them that they'd thrown in free books. I mean, TH and F, seriously. FTH, my initials. I was so appreciative of the fact that they had thrown in free books, complimentary books, that I thought, you know, I will give them a go. And, oh my gosh, no with this one. The next book that I DNF'd was this book, The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. This is a high fantasy, I guess, and I was really intrigued by this book, you guys. I read and read and read and read with this book, despite the fact that it was so incredibly boring. Okay, now, there are people out there who love this book, so I don't feel horrible for saying that James Islington's book was boring. Some people love this, yay! But for me, it was so incredibly boring. And so I kept reading it thinking, this is boring, and that little voice in my head got louder and louder. This is boring. Seriously, this is boring. Why are we still reading this? And so I thought, okay, I'm going to check how far in I am, because I'm sure I'm close to the end. Nay, sir. I had just at that moment gotten to the halfway mark. This is a massive book. It is 693 pages long. And so I read at least a good 350, close on 400 pages before I DNF'd this one. I did a really good job. The next book that I DNF'd was this book, The Black Prism, and I feel so horrible because I actually got this book from my dad. He got it for me for my birthday. And so I just, oh my gosh, I felt so bad DNFing this book, but I simply could not continue to read this book, and I'll explain why. First of all, there is profanity used in this book. I am not someone that objects to profanity if it is used sparingly, but if profanity is used so much that it becomes just like jargon in the book, I don't like that, because not because I'm offended, but because I find it so incredibly uninventive. We have so many words in this English language. Why do you have to keep saying F, 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 F every sentence when you can mix it up and say other words instead and make it so much more interesting? Also, I got to a situation where I was reading about the magic system of this world, and someone was doing something to do with the magic system, and because they were doing that, I was able to discover that part of the magic system, at least for what they were doing in that moment, involved using urine. So, happily unhauling, but feeling horrible for my dad, because he even wrote a little description in the cover. I might just have to hide this in my bookshelf. I might have to hang on to it, because Dad bought it for me. The next book that I DNF'd is a very polarizing book that some people absolutely love to the point that they're obsessed with it, so I might break some hearts here. But others of you, I know I'm not alone, are out there going, way to go, Mr. Francy, I'm glad you actually shed a light on this, but I proudly DNF'd Nevernight by J. Kristoff. Oh my goodness. Do not be surprised. Well, actually, I was going to say, do not be surprised if this makes it to my least favourite books of the year, but I didn't finish it, so it wouldn't qualify. But I think of all the books I DNF'd, this is probably the worst. I mean, it's between this and this and one or two of the others that I'm going to mention. But yeah, there's no way this book is ever getting a second chance from me. I mean, if I change dramatically in 5 years' time, maybe. But this book, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to say this, but this author is just not the author for me, and that's putting it mildly. J. Kristoff has to be the single most flowery writer I have read, and I've read Tolkien, so that's saying a lot. Every single sentence was flowery. It was so overly descriptive, it was crazy, and my head was spinning, and not in a good way, from the beginning of this book, because it was so hard to wrap my head around. Why? Can we be real for a moment? Why do authors feel the need to write at such an advanced writing level to look impressive? And I'm sorry, I really am. I don't like throwing shade. I'm just really, really disappointed because I really wanted to read this book. But if you are writing a writing style that is overly flowery, the only reason you are doing that is to look impressive, and you are going to cut out at least a quarter of the potential readers that you were going to have because they can't deal with how overly flowery it is, which makes it a niche book to begin with. So why would you do this? It makes no sense. Now let's talk about the fact that this is a YA. It's a young adult. This book, its recommended reading age is 13 to 17, and it opens up with a, well, I don't care if this video gets demonetized, it opens up with a rape of a girl. Are you serious? I remember talking about this book when I was first talking about it after having DNF'd it, saying some big wig put on glasses and said, yes, this is a YA. I mean, seriously, who in their right mind thinks that's a YA? The girl is raped in this book. Now, I'm not saying that rape is necessarily a bad topic for books, because sometimes it serves a very good purpose. An example of that is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. An even better example of that is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. But this rape seemed to be incredibly pointless, and yes, I know I've said the R word like 5 times now. I don't care if I get demonetized. I need to start calling a spade a spade. The word is what the word is. The moment we change the word, it gives that word power, and that's not a power it's going to have over me. So again, I'm not offended by the fact that there is a rape in the book. I'm offended by the fact that there is a seemingly pointless rape in this book. It doesn't make sense to me, and it is a YA. Frederick Bachman's Beartown and Kate Elizabeth Russell's My Dark Vanessa are both adult books, as far as I'm concerned. And if Kate Elizabeth Russell's book is a YA, I'm shocked, because I don't think it is. The next book I DNF'd did make me feel really bad, because it was actually a book that was recommended to me by a subscriber. That book is Sabriel by Garth Nix. The subscriber recommended this book to me because they know that I love fantasy, and unfortunately Garth Nix's writing style is what ended up being this book's undoing for me. The next book that I DNF'd was Pan's Labyrinth by Concealer Funke. Now, okay. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this book. Just by the time I got to it, I could not appreciate it. This was in a month where I had unfortunately DNF'd Nevernight, then I had DNF'd Sabriel, then I had forced myself to get through The Book Thief, all of which really disappointed me. And so in a huff, I started reading Pan's Labyrinth. And there was nothing wrong with it. I was a mood reader. I'm never a mood reader, but I was with this book, and it's so unfair because as I said, there was nothing wrong with it, and honestly, I borrowed it from the library, so I don't have it here, but I would definitely reread this book in 2021. The next book that I DNF'd was this book, The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I actually needed a moment to remember why I DNF'd this book, and the reason why I DNF'd it was because it was a bit too much. I don't mean that in like a graphic sense or anything like that at all. What I mean is, let's say for example that I read 20 pages. I feel like within those 20 pages I read 16 stories. The next book that I DNF'd in 2020 was Nobody Real by Steve Camden, and I remember this book. Okay. I mean this book. Okay. So, I've talked to you about writing styles with other books like Nevernight being a big example with J. Kristoff. The writing style in this book is what led me to DNF it, but it was completely different to anything I'd ever read before. I can only describe this writing style as the musical terminology staccato. Now, staccato, rather than being a nice flowing musical piece, is more of a boom, 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 boom. It's notes that are separated. Staccato. Excuse me. And that's how this book read. It didn't flow. It wasn't like Michael woke up today and he got out of bed and then he went to his room. Well, he was in his room, but you know what I mean. Michael woke up, got out of bed and went to meet his friend. And while he was with his friend, this happened. He said, she said, da da da. Instead, it was Michael, full stop, or period if you're American. Okay, so in America you say period. The Australian terminology for period in that sense is full stop. Michael, full stop, woke up, full stop, and he, full stop, left his, full stop, room, full stop. Seriously, it annoyed me so much. And I was listening to this on audiobook while reading it, because I started off just listening to it on audiobook thinking, what is the narrator doing? Because I've never had a narrator read like that. Michael woke up and he went to the kitchen. What? Why aren't you saying Michael woke up and he went to the kitchen? Seriously, why is it so... And then I saw it in the book. I borrowed this from the library, and gosh, am I glad that I borrowed it from the library. And I saw the full stops after every second word. Like, no. I tried so hard to get through this because the premise sounded really good. It sounded like a hard-hitting contemporary. But I got to the end of, I think, the second or third chapter, and I was literally screaming out, "Stop it!" I just could not handle it anymore. The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch. I was so excited about this book. Oh my goodness. Leading up to it, I was so excited, and then I finally got it in my hands and started reading. I'm like, yay! And then 5 minutes later, I was like, oh. Okay, maybe it's not for me. Number one is there's a ton of swearing. Apparently that was also a very popular complaint. But I also don't like it because of the graphicness expressed in the prologue. There are these two guys that are talking about, shall we say, the number 2 leavings that you leave in your bathroom. And the final book that I DNF'd was such a colossal disappointment for me. It took me a lot to finally get this book. I had to climb so many mountains to get this book in my hands. And then I started listening to it. Now let me tell you what really intrigued me the most about this book without knowing too much of the premise. What really intrigued me is that this book is being narrated in the audio version by my favourite female booktuber and my favourite male booktuber, Mrs. Murphy Napier and Mr. Daniel Green. So that really excited me, and I thought, honestly, it doesn't matter how terrible it is, the fact that Murphy and Daniel are going to read me a story, I'm just really excited about this, but I want the physical copy so I can read along with it. It took a very long time to get this book here, you guys. And I pushed and persisted and did everything I needed to finally get it in my hands. It is called Igniting the Phoenix by Alethea Steron. And I am very happy that I eventually got the book in my hand. And almost feel horrible to myself for getting rid of this book and unhauling it because of how much it took me to get it in my hands. But this book, unfortunately, I don't know whether to blame Alethea Steron for this or whether to blame her editors or her publishing company or whatever, but this book does not read like a book. And what I mean by that is this book reads like a draft. And actually, less than that. This book reads like a plan for a book rather than a book itself. So to give you an example, this is not in the book, but to give you an example of what I mean, the book might open up saying, Daniel is walking down the street. We see that there are 3 lamps, street lamps ahead of him. The first one is on, the second one is flickering, the third one is off, but then once he walks under the third one, it turns on and then dim. Then Daniel decides he's going to cross the road to talk to someone else, and so he does. He walks up to him and says hi, and the other guy says hi back. And this is literally what's happening in this book. It reads like a detailed plan of what Alethea Steron wants to do, but it's not actually the book yet. So come on, Alethea Steron, stick to the plan, grab your plan, read through your plan, and actually write it as a book, and I will purchase it. This book does not have a lot of reviews at all, because a lot of people just did not like this book, and I think that is why. It doesn't read like it is a finished copy of a book. These are some of the books that I DNF'd in 2019. How many books did you DNF? Oh my goodness, we're going to have to do it again because I said 2019. These are some of the books that I DNF'd in 2020. How many books did you DNF in 2020? Let me know in the comments section below. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it, letting you guys go with peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday for now, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah! Thank you so much for watching, and Merry Christmas!